When we think of leadership, we often think of grand visions, brilliant strategies, decisive action. And yes, all of these are vital. But beneath all of them, beating like a hidden heart, is something even more fundamental: emotional resonance. Leadership, at its core, is not first a matter of intellect or even competence. It is first a matter of emotion. Before people follow your ideas, they follow your emotional presence. Before they trust your plans, they trust your humanity. Resonance is the invisible thread that connects leader and team, speaker and listener, one soul to another. It is the felt sense that you are not merely transmitting information, but sharing a reality, touching something alive within others that echoes, vibrates, and responds. Without resonance, communication remains superficial. Without resonance, strategy remains abstract. Without resonance, leadership remains transactional, an exchange of tasks for rewards, empty of true loyalty or passion. But when emotional resonance is present, everything changes. Teams move not just with compliance, but with commitment. Conversations shift from negotiation to collaboration. Challenges are faced not alone, but together, with shared courage and resilience. And what is the bridge that creates resonance? Empathy. Empathy is not a soft indulgence or a sentimental luxury. It is the skill, the art that allows leaders to enter into the emotional world of others, to feel with them, to understand them from within rather than judging them from without. Empathy transforms leadership because it transforms the relationship between leader and team. It dismantles the walls of hierarchy and fear. It dissolves the illusions of separation. It says, I see you. I hear you. I am with you. And in that moment of recognition, a team is no longer just a collection of individuals. It becomes a living, breathing organism capable of collective greatness. In this lesson, we will explore what true empathy is and what it is not. We will dive into the neuroscience behind emotional resonance, uncover practical techniques for cultivating empathy in daily leadership practice, and confront the very real barriers that so often block our path to genuine connection. Because leadership is not just about moving plans forward. It is about moving people forward. And people move best when they feel seen, heard, and understood. True leadership begins not with the mouth, not even with the mind, but with the heart. Before we can build emotional resonance, we must first be crystal clear about what empathy truly is and what it is not. Too often, empathy is confused with sympathy or pity, but these are fundamentally different experiences, and for a leader, understanding this difference is not academic. It is practical. It changes everything. Sympathy is feeling for someone. It is seeing their pain or struggle and feeling sorry for them, often from a distance. It carries a flavor of separation. You are over there, struggling, and I feel bad for you. Sympathy, while often well-intentioned, can unintentionally reinforce hierarchies. It can place the speaker above the listener, turning the other person into an object of pity rather than a partner in shared humanity. Pity is even further removed. Pity sees the other as weak, unfortunate, somehow less. It distances rather than connects. And if a leader communicates pity, even subtly, they kill empowerment. They create an emotional chasm where there should be a bridge. Empathy is something altogether different. Empathy is feeling with someone. It is entering into their emotional world, not to fix it, not to judge it, not to distance yourself from it, but simply to be there, present, open, available. Empathy says, I may not have lived your exact experience, but I can meet you in the emotion of it. I can understand your fear, your joy, your hope, your grief, because I too am human. Empathy requires presence. You cannot empathize while distracted. You cannot empathize while planning your next statement. You must set aside your own inner noise long enough to tune into the frequency of another's heart. Empathy requires openness. You must be willing to feel uncomfortable emotions, your own and others. You must resist the temptation to minimize, dismiss, or rush past feelings that make you uneasy. And most of all, empathy requires humility. The humility to accept that you do not always know what someone else is feeling. The humility to ask rather than assume. The humility to enter into another's experience without the need to dominate, fix, or control it. In leadership, empathy is not about agreeing with every perspective. It is not about abandoning standards or dissolving accountability. It is about understanding the emotional terrain you are asking people to walk across. It is about seeing the real, living human beings behind the roles, the metrics, the performance reviews. When leaders lead with true empathy, they unleash an extraordinary force: the power of authentic connection, the power of shared humanity, the power of a team that feels not just managed, but truly understood. Empathy is not weakness. Empathy is strength. And it is the strength upon which emotional resonance and all great leadership is built. It is not mere poetry to say that we feel each other's emotions. It is biology. It is science. At the heart of emotional resonance lies the extraordinary discovery of mirror neurons, a system within the human brain that lights up not only when we perform an action or feel an emotion, but also when we observe someone else performing that action or feeling that emotion. When you watch someone smile, the mirror neurons in your brain activate as if you are smiling yourself. When you see someone in pain, your brain simulates that pain within your own nervous system. You do not simply observe others, you participate in them. This biological fact has profound implications for leadership. You do not lead emotions from the outside. You lead them from within, by the emotions you embody and transmit. When you are calm, your calmness helps regulate the emotional states of those around you. When you are anxious, your anxiety becomes contagious, spreading through your team faster than any email or meeting memo could. This phenomenon is known as emotional contagion. It is invisible, but it is powerful. Teams unconsciously sync to the emotional state of their leaders, like musicians tuning their instruments to a conductor's note. What this means is both terrifying and liberating. You are always communicating, even when you say nothing. You are always influencing the emotional climate, even when you are unaware of it. A leader who masters emotional resonance understands that emotions are not side effects to be managed after the real work is done. Emotions are the real work. They are the invisible current that either powers or paralyzes performance, innovation, resilience. When a team feels emotionally aligned with its leader, when they feel understood, valued, connected, something extraordinary happens. Motivation ceases to be a problem. Engagement becomes natural. People bring not just their skills, but their full passion, their full creativity, their full humanity to the mission. But when a leader neglects emotional resonance, when disconnection, misunderstanding, or emotional coldness take root, no amount of technical brilliance can save the organization from decay. The science is clear. We are wired for connection. We are built to attune, to feel with each other, to resonate. Leadership that ignores this truth will always struggle. Leadership that embraces it will ignite something far greater than loyalty or compliance. It will ignite belonging. And belonging is the soil from which extraordinary performance grows. Now that we understand the profound scientific and emotional roots of resonance, we must turn our attention to practice. Because empathy, my dear students, is not a static trait you either have or do not have. It is a living skill, a discipline, an art, and like any art, it demands practice, devotion, refinement. So how do we, as leaders, cultivate real, living empathy in our daily interactions? How do we move beyond intention and into transformative action? The first and most essential practice is deep listening, not surface listening, not transactional listening, where you nod and smile while mentally preparing your next argument. No, deep listening, the kind where you set aside your own mental chatter, your own ego, your own impatience, and truly enter into the speaker's world. You listen not only to the words they say, but to the emotions underneath, to the silences between, to the music of their being. Deep listening means you do not interrupt. You do not rush. You do not mentally categorize or solve too quickly. You let the person unfold before you with all their complexity without needing to fix, judge, or even immediately understand. The second practice is reflective statements. Reflecting is the art of naming what you observe, not to impose your interpretation, but to offer a mirror. It is saying things like, "It sounds like you are feeling frustrated," or "I hear a lot of excitement in your voice," or even simply, "It seems like this is really important to you." When you reflect emotions back to someone, you validate their inner experience. You show them, "I see you. I hear not just your words, but your heart." And sometimes, in that simple act of reflection, a person understands themselves more deeply than they did before. The third practice is validation without judgment or fixing. This may be the hardest for leaders because so much of leadership is about solving problems, making decisions, driving action. But there are moments, precious moments, when people do not need solutions. They need acknowledgement. They need to hear, it makes sense that you feel this way, or given everything you are dealing with, your reaction is completely understandable. Validation does not mean you agree with everything. It does not mean you surrender your judgment. It means you recognize the emotional reality of the other person as legitimate, as human, as worthy of respect. When you listen deeply, reflect openly, and validate compassionately, you create spaces where emotional resonance flourishes. You create conversations that do not just move information, but move hearts. You create leadership that is not just effective, but transformative. And let me say this plainly, there is no shortcut. You cannot fake empathy. People feel the truth of your presence, the sincerity of your care, far more acutely than they hear the cleverness of your words. Empathy is not something you sprinkle on top of leadership. It is the ground upon which real leadership stands. To cultivate empathy is to cultivate leadership itself. As noble and as essential as empathy is, it does not arise automatically, especially not in the fast-paced, high-pressure environments in which modern leadership must often operate. There are powerful, deeply human barriers that stand between us and the full exercise of empathy, barriers that every leader, no matter how skilled, must learn to recognize, to understand, and ultimately to overcome, if they are to lead not merely with authority, but with authentic human connection. The first great barrier is busyness and emotional overload. In the relentless churn of meetings, deadlines, emails, crises, and strategic planning, the mind becomes a battlefield of competing demands, each clamoring for immediate attention. In such a state of constant urgency, it is all too easy for empathy to be pushed to the margins, treated as a luxury reserved for a future time when things are calmer, a time, I must tell you frankly, that rarely comes. When we are emotionally overloaded, when our cognitive bandwidth is stretched to its limits, we lose the subtle attentiveness required for empathy. We listen less. We interrupt more. We miss the quiet signals that someone is struggling, the faint tremor in a voice, the slight withdrawal behind polite words. We move faster, and in doing so, we see less, we feel less, we lead less. The second barrier is fear of vulnerability. To truly empathize with someone else, we must, at least for a moment, touch something tender and uncertain within ourselves. We must be willing to feel discomfort, sadness, fear, and longing not from a distance, not as a detached observer, but as a fellow traveler in the human experience. And for many leaders, raised in cultures that valorize toughness, invulnerability, and emotional stoicism, this is terrifying. There is a deep fear, often unspoken, that if we allow ourselves to truly feel, we will lose control, we will appear weak, we will be overwhelmed. And so, rather than risk that exposure, we armor ourselves. We intellectualize conversations. We retreat behind titles and roles. We convince ourselves that professionalism demands emotional detachment, when in truth, it demands emotional courage. The third barrier is unconscious bias and emotional blind spots. Every one of us carries hidden assumptions about whose emotions matter, whose experiences are legitimate, whose pain deserves attention. These biases are not always malicious. They are often invisible, woven into the fabric of our upbringing, our socialization, our unconscious minds. We may find it easier to empathize with those who look like us, who think like us, whose life experiences mirror our own, and harder, sometimes without even realizing it, to extend the same empathy across lines of difference. This creates dangerous distortions in leadership. Certain voices are heard more readily, certain sufferings are minimized, certain perspectives are unconsciously devalued. To lead with true empathy is to wage a quiet, daily battle against these biases, to catch ourselves in the act of selective listening, selective caring, and to choose differently. To stretch our hearts wide enough to encompass not just the familiar, but the foreign, not just the comfortable, but the challenging. Busyness, fear of vulnerability, unconscious bias, these are not minor inconveniences. They are the fault lines upon which the emotional life of an organization can rise or fall. And so the work of empathy is not easy work. It demands time where there is no time. It demands courage where there is fear. It demands self-awareness where there is blindness. But, and here's the saving truth, every act of empathy you manage to extend despite these barriers, Every moment you slow down to truly see another, every time you feel when it would be safer not to feel, you're building something. You are laying the invisible stones of trust, belonging, and humanity upon which extraordinary leadership is built. It is one thing to understand empathy as a concept, to nod wisely when we speak of emotional resonance and connection, but it is quite another thing, a far more demanding, transformative thing, to embody empathy in the very moments when it matters most. When emotions are high, when stakes are critical, when fear, anger, or disappointment surge through the room like a storm, that is when the real test of leadership begins. That is when empathy must move from theory into action. Consider a moment when your team faces fear of change, fear of failure, fear of the unknown. The instinct of many leaders, good leaders even, is to immediately move into reassurance or problem solving. Here's the plan. Here's why you don't need to worry. Trust me, everything will be fine. And yet, in doing so, something crucial is often missed. Before people can move through their fear, they must first feel that their fear is seen, understood, validated. When a leader moves too quickly past the emotion, even with the best of intentions, it leaves people feeling alone in their anxiety, unheard in their vulnerability. And so the fear festers beneath the surface, invisible but corrosive. Empathy in action means first pausing to acknowledge the emotional reality. I can sense that there's a lot of anxiety about this change. It's completely understandable to feel uncertain given everything that's shifting. This is a lot to take in, and it's okay to feel overwhelmed. Notice, we are not fixing. We are not minimizing. We are naming. We are validating. We are creating a bridge between the leader's emotional world and the team's emotional world. A bridge strong enough to carry trust across even the most turbulent waters. Now consider moments of anger. When someone on your team reacts with frustration, with irritation, perhaps even with direct challenge, the instinctive reaction is often defensiveness or dismissal. They're overreacting. They're being disrespectful. But empathy and leadership calls us to ask a deeper question. What pain lies beneath this anger? What fear, what hurt, what unmet need is fueling this fire? Anger, more often than not, is a mask for deeper vulnerability. And a leader who can see beyond the mask, who can respond not with retaliation, but with curiosity and steadiness, can turn moments of rupture into moments of repair. And what about disappointment? When a team fails to meet expectations, when a project collapses despite everyone's efforts, disappointment hangs heavy in the air like a silent fog. Here, too, the temptation is to rush, to assign blame, to issue directives, to push forward. But the empathetic leader knows, first, you must honor the emotional truth of the moment. Acknowledge the pain of the loss. Make space for the mourning of the effort that did not bear fruit. Only then can true learning and renewed commitment emerge. Empathy in action is slow. It is counterintuitive. It feels inefficient to those addicted to speed. But in truth, it is the most powerful accelerator of all, because when emotions are met rather than ignored, people move faster and farther with far less resistance. I want you to understand this deeply. Emotional acknowledgement is not weakness. It is the gateway to collective strength. It is the path through which real resilience is built, not as a theoretical ideal, but as a lived, breathing reality in the heart of a team. And history, again and again, shows us this truth. The leaders who are remembered, the leaders who change not just organizations but lives, are those who had the courage to lead through emotion, not around it. Those who did not fear the storm of human feeling, but who learned to navigate it, guide it, and ultimately transform it into a wind of shared purpose. Empathy is not a detour from leadership. It is leadership. As we arrive at the close of this lesson, I invite you not merely to summarize information, but to feel, to truly feel, the deeper invitation that has been unfolding before you. Leadership is not, and never has been, about simply getting tasks done, about moving pieces across a board, about optimizing performance through cold mechanics. Leadership is, and always will be, about human beings. It is about hearts that beat with hopes and fears. It is about minds that wrestle with doubt and courage. It is about souls that long to be seen, understood, and valued. Empathy, then, is not a soft skill. It is not an optional addition for when the real work is done. It is the real work. It is the art of seeing another human being in their full complexity and responding not with judgment or control, but with presence, with openness, with understanding. To lead with emotional resonance is to recognize that your presence, your emotional availability, your willingness to truly enter into the experiences of others is more powerful than any title you hold or any authority you command. It is to realize that influence is not achieved by pressure, but by connection. That loyalty is not won by force, but by feeling. That greatness in leadership does not come from how many people obey you, but from how many people trust you, deeply, authentically, enduringly. True empathy is not weakness. It is strategic strength. It is the strength to hold space for emotions without being overwhelmed. It is the strength to listen without needing to dominate. It is the strength to validate without losing your own clarity and direction. It is the strength to meet anger with steadiness, fear with compassion, disappointment with courage. When you lead with empathy, you build teams that are not just efficient, but alive. You build cultures where truth can be spoken, where mistakes can be learned from, where innovation can flourish not in spite of vulnerability, but because of it. You build, in short, something that lasts not just results, but relationships. Not just projects, but people. Becoming an emotionally resonant leader is not about adding more techniques to your leadership arsenal. It is about deepening your humanity. It is about remembering, again and again, that behind every KPI, every metric, every strategic plan, there are human lives full of stories, full of dreams, full of fragile, resilient, magnificent hearts. And if you can reach those hearts, not by manipulation, not by strategy, but by real presence, then you will not merely lead. You will transform. You will build something that no economic downturn, no technological disruption, no external crisis can destroy. You will build trust. You will build meaning. You will build the kind of leadership that echoes long after the projects have ended and the titles have faded. This, my dear students, is the sacred calling of leadership. To move not just bodies, but souls. To guide not just tasks, but human journeys. And it begins always with the courageous, humble, relentless practice of empathy.